You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, your favorite political junkie. Well, maybe not your favorite, but definitely a political junkie. I have had to separate myself with the jaws of life from the television set this past week and watching the impeachment trial. When I had to go out, I was plugged into my earplugs and listening on streaming CNN. I'm just hopeless. I'm totally addicted. But a lot about that will be coming out in Fighting Words at the end of the program. Basically, I think it's very hopeful. But then I'm a hope junkie too, so you can't depend on my judgment about that. I figure if you're not a hope junkie, well, what are you left with? A despair junkie? That's not attractive. Anyway, I'm rambling, and I want to get to the program, which is chock full of good things, including my conversation with a Canadian journalist whose new book is delving into aspects of the decades-long mystery about disappearing women and girls from indigenous communities along the Canadian border and in Canada and in northern United States. A very important story, and it's been around, but it's just fully now coming to light, and it's about time. And of course, there's the surrealism corner and lots of other things, so let's get started by going inside the headlines. Well, yes, there's the impeachment trial, but we'll deal with that at the end of the program in Fighting Words. Not that Trump is the only life-threatening virus loose in the world. We're now about a week in from the first alerts by World Health authorities that a new virus, a pneumonia-like coronavirus emanating from Wuhan in east-central China, is spreading globally. Wuhan, a city of 11 million, is larger than any American city, and it's a hub for air, rail, road, and even ferry routes. And although the Chinese government has shut down all domestic and foreign travel, that's quite a challenge considering that 400 million people plan to be on the road for the Lunar New Year holiday, which started Friday. Travel has been contained, although the United States, Thailand, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and South Korea have all confirmed cases of the infection. Inside the headlines, according to the World Health Organization, coronaviruses are a large family of viruses that range from the common cold to much more serious diseases and can infect both humans and animals, although the strain spreading in China is related to two other coronaviruses that have caused major outbreaks in recent years: Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, also known as MERS, M-E-R-S, and SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. The new strain is being transmitted only between humans. Symptoms range from respiratory problems, difficulties breathing, fever and cough, all the way to much more severe cases of pneumonia, kidney failure, acute respiratory syndrome when fluid builds up in the lungs, and death. Now here's the inside. Chinese health officials claim that they have ascertained that the virus started in an unsanitary food market that was selling wild and exotic animals for consumption. Snakes were the most likely cause of the virus, 5 Chinese scientists concluded in a paper published Wednesday in the Journal of Medical Virology. Superstition will get us every time. Although reportedly about 20 people have died in China from the virus, apparently it is survivable with proper medical treatment. Treatment not always available, in fact not even usually available, to the elderly, the frail, and in Chinese rural areas particularly to women. Better news comes from the South Asian subcontinent. On a number of occasions, this program has covered the deaths of young women in Nepal, where Chowpadi, a lethal misogynistic superstition, demands that any woman having her menstrual period must be banished outside away from the home, to a cowshed or a cave or a makeshift hut, no matter how cold or dangerous, in order to protect the so-called purity of the home and the village. Whether from freezing to death in the foothills of the Himalayas, or dying of snake bite, or perishing from asphyxiation for having built a tiny fire to get warm, such young women suffer a hideously high death toll. This last winter, in a first for Nepal, the brother-in-law of a young woman who died in the Acham district was arrested and is being held in detention. Nepali women's rights activists have been pressing authorities to enforce a new law that went into effect last year to punish family members who exile menstruating women from their homes. Traditionalist village chiefs who opposed the law insist that the women are eager to go into temporary exile, even in the dead of winter. The brother-in-law faces a possible 3-month jail sentence if he's found guilty of breaking the law. If he's found guilty. 3 months. She died. Yet this is progress. If the British Trump, right-wing PM Boris Johnson, has his way, on January 31st at 11 p.m., after almost 4 years of negotiation, 3 failed withdrawal plans, and 2 general elections, Britain will formally make a hard exit, that is, all at once, clunk, from the European Union. Britain will then have to negotiate a brand new trade agreement with the EU over the next many months, and Scotland may very well leave, and it's the end, in fact, of Britain, and England's back to England. Alicia Hurry Dasani Gupta, a New York Times gender reporter, noted that this will have a disproportionate effect on women. Brexit. In 2018, a majority of employed women in Britain were either part-time or temporary workers, for example, and thus much more likely to be living in poverty than men. So when established social protections and workplace policies will be lost, it will affect them all the worse. These are policies such as parenting leave, vacations, sexual harassment regulations, and anti-discrimination laws, many of which have a foundation in EU law. As a member of the EU, Britain was compelled to implement the EU directives and resolutions into domestic law. And former Prime Minister Theresa May, although a conservative herself, had included a commitment in her withdrawal agreements to maintain such protections, knowing they impacted most on women. But Johnson has recategorized them as, quote, a non-legally binding document widely seen as an aspirational piece of paper as to where the government would like to be but doesn't commit to, close quote. When he was questioned, Johnson said women should simply trust him. I don't think so. Let's end on a more cheerful note. Remember in school we learned that all Latin languages had gendered nouns like la plume for the pen and le chien for the dog. Why was a pen feminine, I wondered? And didn't they have any female dogs in France? Were they all boys? Well, now teenagers in Argentina are leading a charge to eliminate gender in the Spanish language. No more los soldados de Perón, the soldiers of Perón. They want les soldadas. The Washington Post reports that such efforts are at the center of a global debate over gender and the growing visibility of so-called non-binary identities, but especially are influenced by a wave of feminist movements worldwide. Reactions, of course, differ. In Germany, there were protests over local efforts to adopt gender-neutral language, and in France, a school textbook promoting a gender-neutral version of French prompted the Prime Minister to ban the form on all official government documents. In the United States, however, the use of the singular they has become so prevalent that Merriam-Webster Dictionary adopted its use as a pronoun for non-binary people. In Argentina, it seems to be spreading, at least among adolescents. The Royal Spanish Academy, no surprise, weighing in on the centuries-old language, has said such changes are unnecessary and artificial. I can certainly see the importance of some of these changes. particularly in those languages where every single item is gendered. I think that would affect all one's perceptions of all objects, a predicament from which English is mercifully free. But for the rest, that's the subject for a longer meditation. Now, feel free to go pet your female puppy. It's time for our first quick break, but still coming up, there's a lot. There's the conversation with this interesting author about the tragic vanishing, the mystery of disappeared women and girls who are indigenous in Canada and in the northern United States, I might add. And also there'll be my thoughts while watching the impeachment trial coming up in Fighting Words at the end of the program. But for now, we have to get there by going through what's coming up next, the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And now we're back. Really, did we ever leave? In the Surrealism Corner. What's in a name, Shakespeare wrote, ironically, knowing full well that a great deal resided in a name. Indeed, why identify something by its accurate name if you can possibly obfuscate its meaning? The wonderful writer, the late Ursula K. Le Guin, described the power of great sages and magicians in her beautiful Earthsea series as the power to correctly discern the true names of things. So you can imagine the nefarious motives behind the Trump regime now finally acknowledging climate change at last when the planet is almost checking into hospice care, but still not using those forbidden words, change and climate. The Trump administration is about to distribute billions of dollars to coastal states, mainly in the South, red state Trump country, to help steel them against natural disasters worsened and intensified by climate change. But states that qualify must first explain why they need the money, which has led to linguistic contortions in applications by conservative states like Texas. In a 306-page draft proposal, for example, Texas cites changing coastal conditions, while South Carolina refers to the destabilizing effect and unpredictability of being slammed 4 years running by 3 major storms plus barely escaping being targeted by 3 hurricanes. Louisiana, which is taking some of the most aggressive steps in the nation to prepare for climate change, actually does include the verboten phrase in its proposal, but just in one place, an appendix on the final page. I say, if it storms like a torrent, if it floods like a catastrophe, if it flames like a conflagration, why, it must be totally predictable. Climate change. The 2019-2020 World Economic Forum's annual gender report ranks 153 countries, taking into account 4 factors: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. The report has striking predictions on closing the gender gap, and we better ration our strength. It will apparently, at this rate, take more than 2 centuries to reach parity on economic participation and 99.5 years to close the gap in political empowerment. For the 11th year, Iceland remained the top country for gender parity, followed closely by, surprise, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. Yemen fell 4 places from 2018 and is now ranked at the very bottom of the list at 153. As for the United States, we didn't make it near the top 10, although even Nicaragua and Rwanda are in the top 10. We're down at 53, having dropped another 2 points since 2018, now ranking well after such countries as Bangladesh, Bolivia, Zimbabwe, Cuba, Burundi, Slovenia, and such. But don't get depressed. We did squeak in a few points ahead of the notorious Ukraine. They rank at 59. There. Feeling better? Speaking of numbers, people are getting cooler. Since 1851, when the so-called normal temperature of the average human body was standardized at 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 Fahrenheit, the human body has gradually but steadily cooled by 0.03 of a degree Celsius or about 0.05 of a degree Fahrenheit per birth decade. Why is unclear, but scientists suggest that improvements in sanitation and in dental and medical care have addressed chronic inflammation, and the constant temperatures maintained by modern heating and air conditioning have helped lower resting metabolic rate. Today, a temperature of 97.5 might be closer to so-called normal than the traditional 98.6. So don't think that your thermometer is registering your temp as abnormally low. It's just that you've become one cool cat. Now, wish you could think of an anti-sexist, anti-racist, stick it to Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin for their canceling the planned Harriet Tubman $20 bill, which was supposed to have gone into circulation this year, removing or reversing the long controversial image of Andrew Jackson. Jackson himself was proudly identified, self-identified too, as the Indian killer, and he was generally an all-around stain on the office of the presidency, having once ridden his horse directly into the White House. Now, wish you could take such an action in a way that would reverberate through the entire system and have an impact in places that you hadn't even anticipated? Wish you could do all this and not get busted for it? Do I have a fun making good trouble action for you? A creative mischief maker named Dano Wall has devised a rubber stamp that's for sale for $20 online at tubmanstamp.etsy.com. You send away for it, it comes, then you get yourself an ink pad if you don't already have one, and you practice for a while. Then you stamp directly over Andrew Jackson's face on a $20 bill. It's not illegal. Although anti-counterfeiting laws prohibit the willful destruction of or stamping of advertisements on paper money, otherwise stamped currency is fit for circulation so long as its denomination remains legible, pursuant to 1.1.118 U.S.C. Section 333 of the United States Code. Tubman, formerly enslaved and herself disabled, rescued enslaved persons by the hundreds via the Underground Railway, and she was named a general in Union forces by Lincoln. These bills, as they circulate, are going to have a message of rebellion and wit and in honoring such a heroic woman. Also, the U.S. government had announced the currency change a few years ago from Jackson to Tubman, and under women's movement pressure to end the male and white hegemony on our paper currency. 2020 makes Tubman's 200th birthday anniversary. So it seemed fitting, but Trump and Mnuchin announced that the change would be, quote, indefinitely delayed. Not anymore, boys. You should know also that this project is not for profit, All money left over after covering for materials and business expenses is donated to groups like the ACLU, Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Sister Song, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and Flip the Senate. A full list of the groups that receive these donations can be found at tubman.com/charities. I've been using and giving these stamps to activist pals with delight on all sides. Rarely can you reap more wide-reaching multiple rewards than changing the currency to do what the government had pledged it to do all along. TubmanStamp.com or TubmanStampEtsy.com. Have fun. It's surreal. Time for another brief pause. But coming up is the conversation. And my guest this week is an author of a book called Highway of Tears. For decades, indigenous women and girls have gone missing or been found but murdered along an isolated stretch of highway in northwestern British Columbia. The highway is known as the Highway of Tears. And it's come to symbolize a national crisis because that kind of hideous occurrence over so much time repeatedly does not happen out of context. That's what the book is about. Here is Jessica McDiarmid coming up in just a moment. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for the conversation this week is Jessica McDiarmid. She's a Canadian journalist who has reported on human rights and social justice from all around the world. She's worked across North America and Africa, writing for publications such as the Toronto Star, the Associated Press, Canadian Business, and the Harvard Review. She grew up near the Highway of Tears, and she has been investigating the murders of Indigenous women for the past 5 years. And Highway of Tears, which she's here to discuss today, is her first book, and it's dynamite. Jessica McDiarmid. Jessica McDiarmid, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin.
Tell us how you came to write this epic story.
I grew up in the region where it takes place. So the stretch of Highway 16 that families of women and girls who've been taken have named the Highway of Tears runs from central British Columbia, the westernmost province in Canada, northwest out to the coast, just south of the tip of the Alaska Panhandle. And it's about 450 miles in a quite remote area where for decades, really ever since that road was built in the 50s, Indigenous girls and women have been disappearing. Some have been found murdered eventually. Many of them have never been found at all. And it's been a reality here for such a long time. So I grew up in a small town called Smithers, which is right in the middle of it. And as I was growing up, there were 2 girls who disappeared off the highway in 1990 and 1994. So this was something that was a reality of my childhood. And as I then grew up and I became a journalist and I became interested in human rights journalism, and I was all over the world working on stories about injustice. And yet I came from a place, my own backyard, was somewhere where this was happening to such an epic degree that I'd always wanted to do something about it, and eventually reached a point where I was able to go back and do this book.
I'm so glad you did. The name itself Highway of Tears got me in the heart to begin with, because when the women named it that, they obviously had in memory Trail of Tears, which was, as I'm sure you know, the name of the forced march removal of Seminole and other indigenous peoples from what is now the south of the United States, moving them, just uprooting them. Want the land, out you go, and sticking them in Oklahoma and other places. How can the government of British Columbia still be not doing enough about this after so long?
That was one of the questions that I was seeking to answer when I set out on this journey, figuratively and literally. I walked the highway several times with families. Was just, how could this have happened?
Yeah.
And and the title, I think somebody said it deserves its own chapter. It's so long, but I think that's a lot of it is racism, it's indifference, it's sexism, it's victim blaming. It's
sure,
having a society where some people are worth more than others in the public view, where some victims are seen as disposable, as expendable. They go missing. Nobody cares. If I, as a white teenager, had gone missing, I imagine there would have been a very different response than there was to these girls, because we still have this really, really unequal society, and the government certainly is part of that. Police forces are part of that. Authorities are part of that, but the public is a huge part of that too, and that's where we can all change this, because there needs to be political will, and we've seen it in Canada. We've had periods where there was. Our election previous to this one, when Justin Trudeau was first elected, the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women became a real election issue.
I remember that.
Indigenous girl in Winnipeg, Tina Fontaine.
That's right. I remember that.
And it was the first time that an Indigenous girl had gotten the kind of attention that generally has been reserved for affluent white victims.
Yes.
Where the whole country was in an uproar and something was going to be done. And so then, that was part of the election platform of Trudeau's government. They were elected in a landslide. They immediately launched this national inquiry, which just wrapped up in June of this year. And we just had another election, and there was hardly a whisper about it. I just saw a headline this morning from the Organization of American States, which is an organization that has castigated the Canadian government previously for its human rights abuses against Indigenous women, saying not nearly enough is happening with this national inquiry report. And so, 4 years ago, I hoped that it was the beginning of the end of the indifference, and now I'm afraid that it doesn't seem so.
What should be done? Is it all of the above? I mean, better policing, addressing the communities that these women come from, their own needs, general education, better transportation, affordable transportation. I mean, what is the plan recommend, and why is it so hard, except for political will, of course, to effectuate?
It is massive. The National Inquiry issued 231 what they termed calls for justice, which encapsulate every facet of Canadian society. There's some particulars when it comes to the Highway of Tears because of the region. So things like there's no cell service along most of that highway. So if you break down along it, which I have, you are literally at the,
mercy,
the forces of whoever passes you. Yes.
Yeah.
There's
would be
a little bit of transportation, but there's not much. So there's some really easy, tangible things that would be
exactly. That would be a start. Cell service, bing, right there. Okay.
Yeah. But then, I mean, in a lot of the things that then on a national level, and I'm sure they would be very similar in the United States, that need to be done to help the Highway of Tears and everywhere else that were covered in this report there's systemic changes in sort of every facet of society. So policing, education, child welfare, socioeconomic factors. It's enormous, but it has to be done, and it's the right thing to do. And the sooner we get going, the better.
What are the nations that you're dealing with? The indigenous nations in that area of Canada?
There's a number. So there's on the coast in the Prince Rupert area. There's the Tsimshian. Mm-hmm. There's the Haisla, a little bit south of there, the Wet'suwet'en Nation, which is the territory upon which I grew up. The Gitxsan Nation, the Carrier Nation, Clay Tene. I feel like I'm going to forget one.
Oh, this is so not a test. But I'm just wondering, were they consulted for the report? Have they wished to take leadership on this? Have they been rejected? Have they been minimized? I mean, what's been the relationship with the nations?
In terms of the national inquiry?
Well, yeah, and the government making something effectual happen.
Mm-hmm. I think the nations. I mean, the only work that's been done in most of the cases has been done by the nations. Oh. So, starting in 2006, when a bunch of families got together and they walked the length of the highway, and then came to Prince George, where there was a symposium led by the Clay Tene Nation. That included government officials, families, social agencies. It was a great gathering of everybody who came together to tell their stories of their loved ones and to say, how do we fix this? Uh-huh. And they came up with a report with 33 recommendations that were all designed to be sort of straightforward and doable. Wow. And everybody vowed that now it's going to change now. This is the end of the Highway of Tears. Right. The government promised, and 13 years later, very few of those are in place. And the work that has been done mainly was done through a group called the Highway of Tears Initiative, which is run through an indigenous agency that serves First Nations in that area, and they have sort of kept the flame alive all these years, but with very, very, very minimal funding. So, one staff member doing it, and funding for that staff member for the next 2 months, and then who knows what will happen. Donations to pay for gas.
So it's to spit in a prayer. Yeah.
Yeah. There was promises made and broken. Then I am afraid the same thing is going to happen with the national inquiry. And the pain for families to go to something like this. I have one of the most heartbreaking memories I have of reporting this book was the final day of the national inquiry hearings in Smithers, and a family that I had met the year before testified about their sister and mother, their lost loved one. And when it was over, one of the women came out, or she went outside to have a cigarette, and I went out and gave her a hug, and she said, "That hurt so badly. Please don't let it be in vain." And it just gutted me because I just, and I'm afraid that will happen again. And it did, it does. And we really need to stop this.
Well, I must say, Jessica, that what makes this book particularly powerful is that, and I don't, in my reading about disappearances of Indigenous women and my networking, at least with the women in the Winnipeg area, with women who work on this all the time and with the families, I've never seen such in-depth coverage and so sensitively done as yours is on the families. I mean, I hope lots of people read this, and I hope lots of people in Canada and below the border here act on this in any way they can think to do. It's again called Highway of Tears, a true story of racism, indifference, and the pursuit of justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Congratulations on writing the book, and congratulations to those of us who get to read this first investigative book on the series, a series for years of unsolved disappearances and murders in rural British Columbia of Indigenous women. Thanks again for writing the book, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
We have to take our final break now, but then I'll be right back with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Sometimes thoughts while watching the impeachment trial can be fighting words. Because as a writer, I mostly work at home. Because I'm a news junkie and a political junkie as well. Because being female, double-tasking comes second nature to me. Because you don't get to watch living history every day, and this is history we all have a part in. I watched almost every boring and exhilarating moment of the first 5 days of the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. I know that others didn't have that enviable privilege or didn't choose that tedious burden, however you view it, but I also know that in the meanwhile I did closets and drawers, paid bills, watered and fed numerous plants, wrote these notes, organized this podcast, and answered mail, all with one eye and ear glued to the TV. When I did have to go outside, I earplugged and streamed from CNN because if I missed something, clearly the world would end. So here are some jottings from those days, which I decided to jot instead of making popcorn, since that seemed frivolous. The ceremony itself is impressive. Nobody does ceremony like the Brits, of course, but still, the solemn walk of the House managers led by the House clerk, a woman and an African American, and the sergeant-at-arms, carrying the articles from the House of Representatives to the Senate, the hear ye announcement of their arrival. Then the next day, when the trial formally begins, the stately welcoming of Chief Justice Roberts in his robes, his mounting the podium and grasping the gavel. You can almost sense, and certainly hope, that many of the Republican senators, probably for the first time, suddenly feel the gravity of a situation they have been instructed by their leader to dismiss as a hoax. Striking how really young John Roberts is, certainly for Chief Justice. Barring unforeseen illness or events, he's likely to be there a long time. But long service on the Supreme Bench has been known to change and even reverse a justice's positions and beliefs. Roberts also knows certainly that the courts get named for their chief justices, the Warren Court, the Burger Court, the Rehnquist Court, etc., and I doubt that he wants to go down in history as having steered the Roberts Court to a reputation of blatantly partisan unfairness. Looking at those words I just jotted down makes me realize they just might be as stupid as the phrase, "It's only the wind." In any event, we'll have quite a few years in which we can help him mellow from a conservative appointee into a wise human being. Trump's defense team, from whom we will hear more over the weekend and next week, is expectably almost all male and white, and which has recently added Ken Starr of Clinton impeachment zealotry and the ever-hyperventilating Alan Dershowitz, Fox News favorite, who has also represented O.J. Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, and Harvey Weinstein, and thus is every woman's favorite, as you can imagine. Comparing the teams makes me proud of the Democratic House managers, I have to say, because they look like America. Reportedly, they had less than a week to prepare after being named by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but wow, are they prepared. Workaholic staffers on the House Intelligence, Judiciary, and Oversight Committees, together with Pelosi's office, have assembled a stunning barrage of charts, graphics, precisely queued up videos, and arguments that are crisply written and, for the most part, well delivered. Pelosi. What a job that must have been, choosing the 7 House managers. 2 were givens, Jerry Nadler of New York, chair of the Judiciary Committee, and Adam Schiff of California, chair of the Intelligence Committee. Both white, male, and coastal. So she had to consider seniority, but also freshness, and geographical representation, and moderate to radical Democrat, and age differences, race, ethnicity, gender representation, experience as former prosecutor or at least lawyer, oratory skills, and who would just be plain old best for the task. Maybe also who was healthy enough to stand the hours and pressure. Maybe also who was owed a really big spotlight favor. My God. Our prosecutorial team is doing something surprising and very clever strategically. Still trying to push for witnesses and testimony to be allowed at the trial, but knowing that McConnell will stand in the schoolhouse door before he lets that happen, they have chosen not to address procedure in their opening remarks as is traditional, but rather to present what evidence they have so far been able, despite the stonewalling, to squeeze out of Trump world, and to present it right at the very beginning when the senators are most alert and the TV audience is at its largest and most interested. The defense team is visibly caught off balance by this. Bet Pelosi thought it up. The repetition is a bit deadening. On the other hand, some former senators now doing commentary for different news coverage all note that this is probably the very first time many, if not most, of the senators have even heard about any of the evidence, not having paid much attention to what was being investigated by committees at the lower house. That certainly is true of much of the viewing public who's just waking up to all this, though it's depressing to think they're joined by senators who at least should read newspapers. Nevertheless, the repetition is teaching them now, so I withdraw my complaint. The House managers seem indefatigable, although I have my favorites and my not-so-favorites. Some are clearly workhorses and not show horses. Others are both gifted and polished in oratory and in how to deliver impassioned feelings through well-reasoned points in a manner that mounts to a crescendo, has a shape, stirs the blood. I think I'm getting a crush on Adam Schiff. Chairman Nadler of the House Judiciary is my own congressman, and Jerry is really good, hard-working congressman, bit tired now after decades in the job, not in great health, never one of the glamour boys. Short, overweight, though thinned out now due to illness, so his suits hang on him awkwardly, touchingly. He is perpetually sad-eyed. Tevye escaped from fiddling on the roof and gone to Congress, which hides a tactical brain ever at war with a radical heart. Not a great speaker, he gets caught up in his own righteous Old Testament rage at the Trump doings that brought us to this point, shattering the fake courtesy, so the other side then intervenes, stung and whines, and the Chief Justice has to say, now, everyone, and Jerry seethes. Others on our team, in the brief glance at them we can spy out, exchange glances about him. Maybe they think he is a problem. Problem or not, there's a shabby magnificence to Nadler that demands respect and certainly has mine. Val Demings from Florida is a firecracker with a power, intellect, and a killer smile. A former police chief, she's the only African American among the three women, and she carries enough smarts and energy to make up for the seeming lack thereof in the other two. Zoe Lofgren of California, I assume chosen for her experience in the Clinton impeachment trial, and Texan Sylvia Garcia, who appears to have trouble reading from her own notes, trouble that sometimes results in hilarious mispronunciations like Vladimir Putin. Hakeem Jeffries, part of the House Democratic leadership team, has a compelling delivery even if too much on one note, the note of indignation. Youngish newbie Jason Crow of Colorado is a surprise. A former Army Ranger and Bronze Star recipient, he's eloquent in his presentation of the reality of war as faced by Ukrainians dependent on the U.S. but strong-armed by Trump. Then there is Adam Schiff. Oh, yeah. His quick intelligence, skills as a former prosecutor, his knowledge of the Constitution, or his staff's knowledge, and of the framers' intent, his care to always call them the founders or the framers, not, as others do, the fathers, and his ability to speak seemingly extemporaneously for 2 hours with only a glance now and then at his notes, and to look fresh the whole time, even at 1 a.m, and to speak in full paragraphs without ums and uhs. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I get the feeling that he alone of the mostly dunderheads in the Senate chamber is acutely aware that every word he says, that everyone involved says for that matter, will be studied for centuries. Yet it doesn't make him pompous. His eloquence and his repertoire of different tones and the ease with which he shifts between them make you think he could be transported back to the 18th century to converse gracefully with the framers without blinking an eye. Stunning. Definitely getting a crush on Schiff. Then the usual suspects. Our side minority leader Chuck Schumer, their side majority leader Mitch McConnell, self-named the grim reaper of any progressive legislation the House might ever send the Senate while he's in charge. For me, the only question of real importance regarding McConnell is, which does he care about most? Defending Trump and thus getting to keep on installing 30-year-old right-wing judges for lifetime appointments on federal courts? Or keeping the Senate Republican and staying majority leader? One or the other. He knows that now 70% of the American public wants witnesses and testimony in a longer and fair trial different from what he planned. He knows that 70% of the American public never agree on anything, so that is one startling hunk of pressure. I'm betting he goes with what he wants, even if Trump, who wanted weeks-long circuses, now has changed and wants the whole thing over yesterday. I'm betting on Mitch for Mitch. I think of how much work it took to bring this moment about. It's breathtaking, all the way from us in the streets to staffers in the House committees. I think of how easy it is to be cynical about all this, assuming we know how it will turn out, with the Republicans letting their guy off no matter the cost. But I also think that there was a day when the Senate chamber held only white men, and then only men, and that's not the case anymore. Frankly, it's thrilling just to hear so many quotations from the framers, who really thought this crazy experiment was worth trying, even though they knew they'd never live to see how it turned out. Today, it's turning out. It's turning out. The ferocity of the debate is as intense as it was between those who built these institutions, though it's ironic that such a grotesque state as Trump has inflicted on this country has also brought forth new fires struck from the flint of that original vision. But this time the experiment is being embodied and articulated not by white guys in powdered wigs, but by a black woman ex-police chief and member of the United States House of Representatives. Oh, yeah. And definitely a crush on Adam Schiff. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.